live with her. And anyone who disagrees with that is, by definition, a racist. Candace Owens is the founder of the charity Blexit. She joins us tonight. It's a little weird, Candace Owens, to see the Democratic Party, people like David Axelrod and Joe.
Okay, so Reasonable and Responsible wanted my reaction to Tucker Carlson's monologue. So my reaction to almost every Tucker Carlson monologue is that he's riveting TV, he's dramatic, and how do you create drama? It's not usually with the judicious sharing of wisdom. It's you present a distorted picture of reality to rally your side. So I think Tucker Carlson is usually hate porn, but he's hate porn for my side. So I'm generally sympathetic to his worldview, but at the same time, I recognize his product as hate porn. It should only be consumed in reasonable quantities by people who can handle it and won't spin off and go off the handle. Because probably the biggest disagreement that I have with my chat is that I don't believe people evolved to be gullible. Right? We wouldn't be here if the end product of tens of thousands of years of human evolution was that we just believed, things that we were told by our social superiors. We have evolved. We've developed an effective skepticism of other people when they try to manipulate us and convince us of things, particularly on things that are of vital importance for our life. Now, we can believe various conspiracy theories about there's life on Mars, that, this person died for our sins, that the key to eternal life is XYZ. But these abstract matters have nothing to do with how we lead our daily lives. So how we spend our money, the choices we make in our daily lives, people tend to be appropriately skeptical. And the net effect of political propaganda and media propaganda and the propaganda of our educational system is not zero, but it's fairly close to zero. It's a lot closer to zero than it is even to 5%. I don't believe that the combination of the news media, of our academic institutions, our educational institutions, our cultural institutions, our legal institutions, our big business institutions trying to shift us in certain directions, I don't believe it even affects 5% of us. So if I had to put a number on it, I think maybe it shifts 1% of the vote at most. I think probably shifts 1% of the vote. So I don't believe that we evolved to be gullible. I don't believe that people are just sheep who, follow what the media tells them, who just do what their teachers tell them. And one proof of this is the number of times Americans have voted for Republicans for president, even though virtually the elites were united in condemning this election. So Dwight Eisenhower was elected president of the United States twice in the 1950s, even though elites were opposed to him. Richard Nixon was elected president of the United States twice as a Republican, even though the elites were overwhelmingly opposed to him. Ronald Reagan was elected twice as president of the United States as a Republican, even though the elites were overwhelmingly opposed to him. George H.W. Bush was elected once, even though the elites were opposed to him. George W. Bush was elected twice, even though the elites were opposed to him. And even though the elites were overwhelmingly against Donald Trump in 2016, he also was elected president of the United States. So if our educational and media and business and cultural and legal elites had as much power as many people think, then these Republican victories would not have happened. So how come the left can dominate the news media, can dominate the academy, can dominate our schools, can dominate big law, can dominate much of corporate America, and yet people still feel free to vote Republican? Right. So I don't think that the media propaganda and educational propaganda and cultural propaganda and the shadowy they who are supposedly controlling us, I don't think they have nearly as much power as you probably think they do. So this conspiratorial mindset that there's this shadowy group, the banker class, the deep state, the intelligence community is just manipulating most of our citizens, and people are just sheep in their hands. I just don't think it's true. And it echoes with what happened in the late 1960s, early 1970s with left-wing terrorism. Why was this surge of left-wing terrorism in the late 1960s, early 1970s, a terrorism far more severe, far more debilitating, that killed far more people than what we have in our present day from Antifa and what we have in our present day from right-wing sources? And the reason you had this surge of left-wing terrorism was that the left in America and in Europe, particularly in Germany, became convinced that the consciousness of the people had been irremediably warped by capitalism. So just like you believe that the consciousness of the people is irremediably warped by our educational system and by the news media and by shadowy elites, right? The left also believed that the consciousness of people was irremediably warped by capitalism. And so because the consciousness of the people is warped, then you probably think on the right now that politics doesn't really matter because it's just like shadowy elites who are running things. And people on the left who went into left-wing terrorism, such as the Weathermen Underground and the Red Army, the Baader-Meinhof complex in Germany, they similarly believed that the consciousness of people was so warped that politics was absolutely useless because people were not free to really make decisions because they lacked the ability to navigate the system. So whether you think it's an oppressive capitalist system that's warping people, whether you think it's an oppressive system that's run by the deep state, by the banker class, by the intelligence community, either way, you're essentially saying the people are too stupid to have to understand what's going on. The people are just sheep. And what this leads to is two primary responses. One is just apathy with regard to our wider world, our community, with regard to the political, with regard to making social and cultural change. You just give up, right? Because shadowy forces are just too powerful. So this tends to be the response of losers, right? People who are losing at life, people who are unable to keep up, people who have the benefits of freedom, but then are unable to construct a coherent identity that works for them. And so they see their peers moving on ahead of them, accumulating wealth, accumulating prestige, building a family, right? Building a career, building happiness, right? If you see your peers, people who are no more intelligent or talented than you, being much more successful than you in life, it's very tempting to dissociate from reality, say, oh, this is so confusing, and then choose an explanation for your confusion. Oh, it's this or that conspiracy. Right? And these malevolent forces, they're just way too powerful for me to take on. Right? There's nothing I can do. There are these shadowy conspiracy groups that are absolutely running things. So that's the reaction of losers. Now, people who feel that they have agency, people who aren't losers, but still believe that the consciousness of the people is warped, that the people are too stupid, too manipulated, too propagandized to be able to see what's really going on. All right. Then if you think there's some shadowy group that's warping the people and that conventional politics is useless, then you're very likely to take violent action. All right. If the system is corrupt and cannot be fixed through conventional means, and you feel that you're a person who has agency, then it's very likely that you'll become sympathetic, if not an active participant in terrorism, whether you're on the right or the left. And I think this is a bad idea. I don't think one should usually devote one's life to politics, but we can make sense of the world around us. And I'm not saying trust Joe Biden or trust any public figure. You have to understand everyone in their context, understand everybody in their genre, situate people in their genre. Right? Politicians are obviously deeply affected by the incentives that operate on them. No more that you're deeply affected by the incentives that operate on you, and I'm deeply affected by the incentives that operate on me. So you have to understand who is the person who is saying something, who is his primary audience, what's his backstory, what are the incentives he's operating under, what is the ideology he is trying to promote, or what's the cause that he's trying to promote, and then is there anything in what he's saying that contradicts his ideology? Because if there is, then it's likely that he believes that what he's saying there is actually true. And he, in some instances, has a commitment to truth that goes above and beyond his ideological commitments. So yeah, we have to understand all institutions and all individuals critically, understanding where they sit in history, their own personal history, what are the forces that are operating on them, what are the incentives that they face. And now, if you want to take that to personal life and you say you trust absolutely no one, then really what you're saying is you're afraid of human connection. You're afraid of building a normal life. You're afraid of making friends. You're afraid of committing to a relationship. You're afraid of living life in community. So if you extend strong distrust to everybody, including in your personal life, then you have spiraled downward into a deeply dysfunctional, dark place, right? And when you say you trust someone, it shouldn't mean that you just trust them implicitly, that they'll always act in your best interest. You understand that your interests are never 100% aligned with someone else's interests. So as soon as you form any kind of connection with someone, you are also at the same time creating the potential for betrayal. And if you develop a relationship over time, the inevitability of betrayal, because betrayal is simply the hyperbolic word that we use for when other people don't have the priorities that we want them to have or expect them to have. But other people will never have our priorities 100% of the time. Different people have different interests. People will choose things that we wish that they don't. So you may have made plans to, fly across the country to spend quality time with a friend, and your friend ends up having a higher priority, maybe work, maybe other relationships, other commitments. And so you feel betrayed because you went to all this effort to spend time with your friend, but your friend's not betraying you. He's simply being true to other commitments. All right. So a wife who sleeps around on a husband, yeah, you can say she's betraying her husband, but she, from an objective perspective, is simply putting a higher value on other forms of connection, on other relationships. So we expect people will behave as we perceive them, right? We tend to have highly distorted perspectives on other people because the complexity of human beings is just way too much for us to handle, right? So just as an economizing device on our time and energy to soothe our emotions, to calm ourselves down in a chaotic world that's far more dangerous than we consciously think about most of the time, we develop pictures of other people, that Joe is honest, that Jeff is outgoing, that Jack is successful in business, that Jill is reliable, that Barry will never let you down, that Mick will show up when he says he does, that Peter is a truth teller, right? We develop these pictures of people in our life, and we ascribe to them all sorts of traits that they only have situationally. So in certain situations, Mick is reliable. In certain situations, Jill does tell the truth, but Jill is not a truth teller, right? I'm not a truth teller. In certain situations, I tell the truth. In other situations, I tell lies. And in other situations, it's a mixture, right? So we think, Peter, he's a brave man. Well, Peter is a brave man only in certain situations. You think your mother loves you. Yeah, your mother may love you in certain situations, but I assure you there are plenty of things that could either happen to your mother or actions that you could take that would end her love for you. You may think that your girlfriend looks up to you and admires you, but there are plenty of actions that you could take that would end that, and there are plenty of situations where she could see you in and her admiration for you would start dissipating. So you may think that Jackie is reliable. Well, in certain situations, Jackie, your employee, is reliable, but when she gets out of work, she turns very likely into a different human being, and there'll be all sorts of situations where she's not reliable. You may think that your rabbi is wise. Well, there are going to be certain situations where your rabbi is wise, and many other situations where he's an idiot. Nobody's wise in all circumstances. You may think Jack's brave. Well, there are certain circumstances where Jack's brave, but there are all sorts of situations where Jack is a coward. So we form these conceptions of people. We mark them down as having these certain immutable traits because in all likelihood, we only see these people in certain situations that bring out these certain traits. But people are far more complicated than that. But we just ignore all contrary evidence because it would require too much strain on our mind. To recognize the left is about as equal as the right. To be correct about things would just be upsetting. I'm someone who's just congenitally, genetically, traditionally right-wing. But why did we evolve all these left-wing tendencies of openness to new ideas, to experimenting with how you organize human community, to compassion for those who are suffering and making stupid decisions, left-wing tendencies to try to nurture people instead of punish them, because these tendencies had evolutionary benefits over time. In certain situations, these tendencies do good things. They help people survive and transmit their seed to future generations. And in some circumstances, these tendencies comprise the test of natural selection. Now, we also have right-wing tendencies to fear strangers, to have strong fear reactions, to consider that which is new to be highly suspicious, to prefer traditional ways of organizing life, right? These tendencies have also proven themselves over thousands of years of genetic testing and evolution and the survival of the fittest, natural selection, right? We have these right-wing tendencies, we have these left-wing tendencies, and some people are more right-wing in their genetics and other people are more left-wing in their genetics and experience, but we need both, right? Because obviously these different tendencies have evolved and are still with us thousands and thousands and thousands of years later because they play a role in natural selection. They play an important role in enabling us to survive and to thrive. So we have a lot to learn from the left, and we have a lot to learn from the center, right? We have a lot to learn from other people. Let's get a little more, and we have a lot to learn from Tucker Carlson. So let's put him in his proper genre. It's
one of the most important systems built up over the generations in the United States is our system of domestic air travel. You can fly from one place to another pretty cheaply, pretty reliably. In the last year and a half, it has collapsed. The Biden administration did this, and it did it on purpose. We have exclusive new details on how they did that and how they're still doing it. Plus, hundreds of drivers in California managed to get gas for less than $1 a gallon. How'd that happen exactly? We'll tell you straight ahead.
Okay, thanks, Tucker. Let's go to the chat. Look forward. Will you be voting for Biden again in 2024? I didn't vote for him in 2020. I think he was the best of all the Democratic candidates for president, the major ones. I mean, I guess Tulsi Gabbard would have been better. But compared to Kamala Harris or Elizabeth Warren or Bernie Sanders or Cory Booker, I prefer Biden. But I was a bloke who votes for Trump. Josh Randall says, this is all scripted nonsense. Methods of disunification and propaganda is all we have now. All right. You're living in about the freest society in the world in human history, and you think that everything's just scripted nonsense. Right? I think you're being a little hard on reality, right? Compared to where, right? If you think everything now is scripted nonsense, all about disunification and propaganda, that's all we have. I mean, you're living in a beautiful country filled with many beautiful people and beautiful opportunities. I mean, never before have we had such an easy ability to share ideas, all over the globe. Right? There are so many awesome things about being alive now. I mean, when do you think it was better, and where do you think it's better? Right? If you think that all we have now is propaganda, I'm sad for you. We have the ability to easily download books, pretty much any book you want. You can find it on Library Genesis, and you can download it for free, and you can read it, and you can get informed. Right? There are so many great lectures online. There are so many wonderful live streams such as this one where people can get informed. Please shut up. You don't diagnose me. I don't know you. I only know you a little bit. I am simply reacting to a public presentation, right? So if I comment on Richard Spencer, or I comment on Laponius or Glib Medley, I've never met any of these people. I don't know any of these people. I am commenting on a public presentation, right? I'm commenting on a very small sector of people that they choose to make public, and I am reacting to that public presentation. Josh Randall says that the White House press secretary is just a demo-side agent. I assume that means an agent dedicated to the destruction of democracy. No, I think that she has a different understanding of democracy probably than we do, and she has a different understanding of what's good. And I don't agree with her, but I don't think she's some sinister evil force. Luke Ford is denied ever voting for any Democrat. Why would you doubt his word on that? Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez is the dumbest moron in Congress. I don't agree with that. I think she's smart, and I think she's charismatic, and I think she's capable, and I disagree with almost everything that she stands for. I don't trust Tucker either. It's one big club, bros. Well, obviously, I don't trust Tucker, but I generally sympathize with his point of view. I mean, I think you have to understand every person critically, put them in context. The court of power is putting layer upon layer of disunifying BS and misdirects. I trust no one, bros. I think that says more about you than what's going on right now in the world around us. I mean, we have so many opportunities for goodness and for finding truth and connection and peace and love and building friendships and building community and sharing ideas that I don't sympathize with this kind of depressed attitude. Josh, is this ranting a byproduct of crypto investments? I'm not ranting, says Josh. Josh, you trust me, bro? So far, says Josh. These are compromised people that do what they are told, bros. Guess what? I'm compromised. Guess what? You are compromised. There's nobody who's not compromised, because we all live in a society. Right? We all have some human connection, and every time that you have connection, there's some compromise that comes with it. All right? Do you think I'm going to stand here and say things that would make life difficult for me when I go to Orthodox synagogues? No, I'm not going to do it. I will give up some of my freedom for my Orthodox Jewish community. Do you think I'm going to stand up here and say things that would make it very difficult to pay my bills? No, I'm not. Right? I need to earn a living. So there are things that I would say if I didn't have that concern that I'm not going to say because I need to earn a living. Right? There's nobody who's not compromised. Right? People in power are just like us, except they have power. Everybody's compromised. Everybody is flawed. Everybody cries. Josh says that the clandestine community banking class is running everything. Okay. Richard Spencer assures us Biden was a masterful political mind like the Apollonian King Macron. I don't think Spencer ever said that Biden was a masterful political mind. Nobody, in fact, has ever said that Biden was a masterful political mind. Biden is not a particularly smart man, but compared to the other Democrats running for president, aside from Tulsi Gabbard, probably the least harmful. Josh Randall says, I do not trust Tucker. I don't trust libs of TikTok either, says Laponius. The masses are utterly gullible. In what sense? Right? In what sense are they utterly gullible? And you're not, right? You're not. Everyone else is gullible, but you're not, because you're superior to what, 99.9% of humanity. I think you're losing touch with reality. Now, I'm sure that there are all sorts of areas, Josh, where you do see things more clearly than most people, but there are going to be other areas of life where you see things less clearly, right? I have the gift of clarity, I think, in some areas. In other areas, I'm just a bloody fool, right? No one is wise in all things. So I'm highly suspicious of perspectives that, I have the truth and everyone else is stupid, that the masses are just all idiots, but I really see what's going on, right? Contrary to that, I understand myself as being filled with idiocy, and people around me are filled with idiocy and wisdom and stuff in between, right? Everyone's a mixed bag. Nixon was taken out by the establishment. Yes, Nixon was taken out because all the elites and all the institutions turned against him, and he played a very significant role in that. It wasn't like it just came out of the blue and there was nothing he did. Nixon was a good boy. He was just starting to turn his life around. No, Nixon played a huge role in his own downfall. You have no agency when it comes to crap government policies, Mr. Ford. Right. I don't control the Federal Reserve. I have no effect on interest rates. I have no effect on foreign policy. I have no effect on domestic policy. No, one individual is usually not going to be able to affect any of these big things. But Donald Trump stood up. No one expected that he was going to become president. And there's a case of one man who made a change. And if you think that our government policies are crap, then where is it better? Like, when in history of things being so much peachier? Like, where is heaven on earth if it's not in the United States? Like, if you think America's a hellhole, then what is North Korea? What is China? What is Africa? Right? You think life is so much better in Finland? In some ways, life is better in Finland. In some ways, it's worse. In some ways, life is better in Australia. In some ways, it's worse. All right? If you're just crapping on the United States and you don't see the many wonderful opportunities and blessings and gifts of living here, then I think you're not in reality. Luke finally pushed me away from this channel, and believe me, that takes a lot. Wow. If my fairly middle of the road comments over the past few minutes pushed you away from this channel, it has absolutely nothing to do with me. So I don't know what's going on with you. It has nothing to do with me. This is depressing. Yeah, it's depressing to think that one needs to hold on to conspiracy theories to make peace with life. But it's depressing that one needs to disassociate from reality if one's unable to look at the failings in one's own life, if one's unable to look at the role that alcoholism, drugs, dysfunctional behavior of many kinds has wreaked in your life, so that you're no longer maintaining stable relationships and not building anything, and therefore you want to believe that this is all the fault of dark, sinister forces out there, then yeah, that's very depressing. You on other platforms, I'm done with this channel, says, and you've made this point 100 times. Yes. And I'm saying I'm applying it to new situations. I was just reading a book, Jacob Taubes, the professor of the apocalypse, and reading about how Jacob Taubes was a big supporter of the left, of the far left, of the student left in Germany in the late 1960s and early 1970s, and how much of that left turned to terrorism because they believed that the consciousness of the people was irremediably warped by capitalism, right? Just like you believe that the consciousness of the people around you is just irremediably warped by the system, right? And if you're a loser, you're going to retreat into conspiracy theories. And if you're a winner, you're very likely to take antisocial, possibly criminal action as a result of this perspective. So saying the same thing, applying it to new situations that I'm reading about and that I see. Luke tries. He always tries. He will never quit. If he has any strength in him, he will try. Luke is a dehumanizing dick to people with curiosity, curious dissidents. Okay. But you're here. He's done that to me too, and I just pushed back and angered forward. Wow, just imagine guys get together and argue about the nature of reality, argue about what are the best sources of information, compare and contrast their moral values, and there are disagreements, passionate disagreements, so much so that guys just want to like wash their hands of each other and completely walk away. Wow, whoever thought that passionate disagreements about the nature of reality, about the nature of accurate information, and disagreements about the constellation of moral values that's before us. Wow, this must be the first time in human history that we're coming to passionate disagreements driving people apart. Wow, I would have thought the passionate disagreements would have just brought people together. Luke is simply reacting to a public presentation. Exactly. Like, I don't think I met one of you in the chat. And even if the one person in the chat who I've met, if I've never met it in person, it wouldn't add that many dimensions to my friendship with him. So even if I met you in person, I still wouldn't know about 99.99% of your life, right? We only ever get access to a sliver of people. So haven't you ever heard the phrase, you never really know someone? You never really know someone. Because people change and situations change.
You may be mad at the airlines right now, you probably are, but thank God for them. This country could not work without reliable domestic air travel. Everything depends on it in a country this big. Our economy depends on it completely. Families depend on it because they live far apart from one another. But that system is collapsing. And as with our economy and our energy sector, it's being destroyed on purpose. The Biden administration is wrecking domestic air travel. There's been no media coverage of this whatsoever, but if you travel recently, you've noticed it. Here's why it's happening. So last week, the FAA informed all air traffic employees that people who haven't had the vax, the COVID vax, which doesn't work, have to wear masks on the job.
Okay, that's absolutely insane to say the COVID vax doesn't work. This is why I can't stand Tucker. I like Tucker and I can't stand Tucker at the same time, right? The vax is very effective at reducing the number of people who die from COVID. The vax is very effective at reducing the number of people who get hospitalized by COVID. So just insane commentary there from Tucker Carlson, which he dishes out at a pretty regular basis. So I was going to talk about how crazy it is that we are risking World War III with Russia, some nuclear exchange with Russia over Ukraine, which is not in our national interests, and just recognizing the harsh reality that this is largely because Joe Biden is deeply unpopular, and he feels like he can't afford to be seen as weak on Putin. Can't afford to be seen as weak on Russia, so therefore he's got to stand up to Russia and Putin in Ukraine, because if we don't fight them over there, we're going to have to fight them over here. So we are risking a nuclear cataclysm. We're risking World War III because Joe Biden is unpopular. And the same thing happened in 1962. We risked a nuclear exchange with the Soviet Union. We risked nuclear war with the Soviet Union with the somewhat manufactured Cuban Missile Crisis, right? John F. Kennedy worried about his popularity. He worried that the Democrats were going to get trounced in the midterm elections, and so he overreacted to what was going on in Cuba and turned it into a dangerous crisis, in large part for the sake of the political standing of his party, just like what Joe Biden is doing right now. So I think that's probably the most significant thing that's going on in the world right now that's not commonly talked about. We are risking World War III because the Democrats are trying to shore up their position for the midterm elections. And so this goes back to a very familiar theme on the show, that dictatorship and democracy are not opposites, right? Every democracy contains considerable elements of dictatorship, and the President of the United States has pretty much all the foreign policy powers of King George III when he ruled Great Britain back in the 18th century. So remember what George W. Bush said, "I'm the commander." See, I don't need to explain. I do not need to explain why I say things. That's the interesting thing about being the president. Maybe somebody needs to explain to me why they say something, but I don't feel like I owe anybody an explanation. Right? That's a very typical attitude from a president of the United States, because they have virtually unlimited power when it comes to foreign policy and starting wars. So there was this terrific law essay by a couple of Yale professors, I think. If Americans know one thing about the system of government, is that we live in a democracy and that other less fortunate people live in dictatorships, because dictatorships, those are what democracies are not. They are the very opposite of representative government under a constitution. But the opposition between democracy and dictatorship is greatly, greatly overstated. Right? So Carl Schmitt notes that the elements of dictatorship always lurk in the background of every democracy, just waiting to emerge and to transform any existing political order. Think about COVID, all those rights that you thought we had to freedom of assembly, just going to work, going to worship, going to practice your religion, all those rights got taken away like that, right? So no matter how well-designed a political system might be, no matter how awesome the Constitution, the true sovereign will always be able to escape the designs of that Constitution and make exceptions to it. So a claim about emergency is simply the standard cause and the standard justification for creating dictatorships. And you're never going to have a government that does not contain within it lurking dictatorship. It's always there. And it will usually be justified by a claim of a state of emergency. Now, Nikita Khrushchev, luckily, right, he was cautious in reaction to John F. Kennedy with regard to the Cuban Missile Crisis. And what was his reward? It cost him his job. He got fired. Right? You think he was the Soviet Union dictator? Well, he was a dictator who got removed from power because he was cautious in reaction to John F. Kennedy. Right? So even dictators often have fairly significant accountability. Right? He was a lot less of a full-scale dictator than most Americans assumed. So John Yoo, the author of the notorious torture memos, has argued that despite American objections to King George III, the president still enjoys the powers possessed by the English monarch at the time of the American Revolution. Right? The king and the president both enjoy unbounded discretion over the use of military force. So who is the sovereign? It's he who can successfully define something as a crisis and then basically do whatever he thinks necessary to meet the crisis. So Joe Biden has said, we got a COVID crisis, and therefore, everyone needs to wear masks. We've got a crisis in Europe, therefore we need to send $40 billion to Ukraine. Who knows what else he'll say we need to do to meet this crisis. So let's have a look at young Kenneth Brown. He's a big fan of the Great Reset.
I want to start this video off. I think it's going to be called In Defense of the Great Reset, in reference to who I am, what do I do, and kind of the meta. And maybe we'll talk more about this at the end, but just whenever I surprise people or I get a negative reaction or people say, you didn't used to be like this, you know, the videos you put out lately about the left versus right, this is just terrible, it's annoying, and it's a total deviation from what you used to do. What's funny is that the videos that I have that are most recently on that theme are cut up clips from like 4 years ago. So,
So what type of person is like terribly bothered by criticism, right? Someone who is depending upon love and support and applause for his sense of self. Like if you have an independent sense of self, if you are internally directed so that if you feel good about what you're doing, then whether other people applaud, whether other people say, oh, I'm rage quitting this channel, I'm never coming back, right? It doesn't really matter that much, right? The more internally directed you are, the less you're moved or shifted or paying attention to whether or not people are applauding you or criticizing you.
You've changed. You've betrayed us. Now, you don't listen. People still think I do 3-hour-long videos. I haven't done a 3-hour-long video in years. So let's launch right into it with that caveat. We might go more into that at the end. But in defense of the Great Reset, and I've touched upon this in other videos, and I'm repeating myself, but it bears repeating again, because I will make the same exact point for years and years and years, and people will claim, like, oh, I was your devoted fan, and then you betrayed me. I'm making the same exact points. People are just selective with their hearing. So the fact that I continue to make videos, I continue to annoy people, I continue...
Okay, so for micro screamers such as myself and Ken Brown to have the delusion that we have devoted fans is an escape from reality. All right, we have some people who like us in certain circumstances, right? Some people like us on this issue or that issue. Some people enjoy the show right now. For some people, at the end of a hard day, they come on the show, but they come to the show not primarily for my sharp insights, but they may come to the show because they want to watch some Tucker Carlson. They want to see some highlights of what's going on in right-wing politics, or probably they want to come to this live stream to chat with other people who they enjoy, right? So micro streamers such as Ken Brown, Deep Left Jerkle, and myself, we don't have fans, right? And the extent that someone says, oh, I'm your fan, they mean that situationally, like at a certain time, certain period of their life, with regard to certain things that you're talking about. It's a metaphor for saying, I like, some of what you're doing in this context right now in my, this time in my life, I'm enjoying your work, right? So this idea that we have fans, right, is absurd.
To alienate people, that's good. Because the truth is, people form a parasocial relationship on me. They think I'm their daddy. And
I guarantee you, nobody thinks that Ken Brown is their daddy. And I guarantee you that there aren't that many people forming a parasocial relationship with either me or Ken Brown, because we both have small audiences. And most of our audience comes from the fact that we're willing to discuss what is conventionally described as far-right politics that does not get an even-handed discussion in mainstream media. And to the extent that we stop talking about, alt-right politics, 95, 98, 99% of our audience goes elsewhere because they really don't care that much for our perspectives on spiritual, psychological, religious growth and metaphysical certitudes.
And they project their views about politics onto me. So when I come out, I break their taboos, I break their sacred cows. All of a sudden, they're wounded and they're out for blood and they want to kill me and whatnot. So this is something that's happened several times now.
I suspect that this is somewhat hyperbolic. People tend to say things online that they wouldn't say in person. So people tend to vent things online that they wouldn't really vent in person. I think this is a hyperbolic reaction to some criticism he's received.
And if you're one of those people, welcome to the show. Welcome to the show. So we're to defend the Great Reset. And it's a very simple thing. I mean, we can defend, we can provide evidence for this, but there's a few premises here. There's 7 billion people. There's going to be 10 billion by the end of this century. And something has to happen, right? Because Elon Musk says, oh, well, we'll just go electric. We'll just have electric cars. The problem with that is batteries require resources, right? Batteries require resources. And those resources are finite. They're not infinite. They're not renewable. So the lithium that goes into these batteries is not renewable. It's very difficult to recycle lithium.
So I'm no expert on electric cars. I certainly agree with Ken Brown that resources are finite, but human ingenuity is pretty formidable too.
There's a finite supply of lithium. The amount of energy that is required to mine lithium, it's very intense. There's a lot of it. You're going to have to blow up mountains, cause immense ecological destruction in order to get all the lithium you need to switch 7 billion people, soon to be 10 billion people, over from fossil fuel-based cars.
So his argument is you might have to destroy some mountains to switch 10 billion people over to electric cars. So if you gave me a choice between destroying some mountains and, on the other hand, providing power and transportation to 10 billion people, I'd be willing to give up a few mountains. But that's just where I come from. To me, people are more important than mountains.
Cars to electric cars. So as I've said before, and I could make a separate video on this, I'd love to just sit down and like go through the statistics and prove why this is a serious issue. But we need to ban all cars. We need to ban.
Whoa, we need to ban all cars? Right. He wants to sit down with you peasants. Right. Remember, this guy disdains populism, disdains nationalism. Right. Right. Nationalism's all about the dignity of the individual. So he wants elite rule. Really, only the elites get dignity. People who have the right metaphysical principles, and he wants to ban all cars, right? Because in his understanding, it would require the tearing down of some mountains to provide power and transportation to 10 billion people. I don't believe we're ever going to get to 10 billion. World population is stabilizing, right? All those predictions about dramatically rising world population figures leading to catastrophe haven't really happened, because world population, generally speaking, the growth has considerably slowed. Most trends in the world today are positive, right? There are more good things going on in the world right now than bad things. If you think that the future looks like a dystopia, that probably says a lot more about you than it does about the nature of reality. Jordan Peterson had a good interview with a bloke who made the point how most trends in the world right now are positive rather than negative. Now, this was probably pre-COVID, but I think that these general points still hold up.
Ban all cars. It's difficult to ban all cars when we have billions of people running around causing all this consumer activity. Capitalists are profiting off of this. We need to reduce the population.
Right. So notice he doesn't just want to eliminate all cars. He wants to get rid of billions of people. Because unless we get rid of billions of people, it would require tearing down some mountains. Right? This is the danger of the youth who chance upon some absurd principles that they pursue to inordinate degrees. Yeah, to get coal, you have to chew up some mountainsides, right? And to get energy, you may have to chew up some mountainsides. So to me, that's preferable to getting rid of billions of people. But that's just where I come from, right? You stack the lives and well-being of 10 billion people on the one hand versus the well-being of a mountain on the other hand. And I side with the people, right? I'm not for getting rid of billions of people, and I'm not for banning all cars.
People, I mean, there's really two situations you can have. You can either reduce the population to and this is part of what the Great Reset is about, right? It's about reducing 99% of the population to what we would consider abject poverty.
That's what the Great Reset is about, reducing 99% of the population to abject poverty. So I'm sure there are many different understandings of the Great Reset, but I would suspect that most people who are pursuing policies that are called the Great Reset are not trying to reduce 99% of the population to abject poverty. Now, can you pursue anti-global warming policies too far so that you ruin economies? Yes. But I think Ken Brown's somewhat overstating his case here.
Or you can massively reduce the size of the population.
Right. These are the two alternatives to Ken Brown. You either reduce 99% of people to abject poverty, or you massively get rid of billions of people. That's how he sees reality. It's kind of a scary worldview.
And those are the two options. There's no third option.
Now, he could have a scary worldview and still be right. Okay, I don't think he's right. So just because I'm saying he's got a scary worldview, I'm not disproving him. I do say that he seems unhinged, particularly when he says there's no third option. That's it. Like, he's such a scholar of energy. He's such a scholar of wealth production. He's such a scholar of electric cars that he says that's our choice. Either 99% of people live in abject poverty, or we have to get rid of billions of people. I think that there are some other alternatives.
Option, there's no, oh, well, we'll go to Mars and there's more lithium on Mars, or, well, we'll just blow up all the mountains. See, that's not an acceptable, like, oh, we'll launch a nuclear, Elon Musk wants to launch nukes on the poles of Mars to terraform, and then Neil deGrasse Tyson came out on the Joe Rogan podcast, and he said, yeah, it doesn't have an ozone layer, you bozo. Listen, bozo, there's no ozone. You're going to get fried. You're going to get a sunburn on Mars.
So I wonder if there are any other alternatives between moving to Mars, reducing 99% of the population to abject poverty, or getting rid of billions of people. I suspect that there are some other alternatives. And Laponia says, my answer to anyone who wants to reduce the population is always you first.
Without ozone. So it's a lot bigger than just, having liquid water or something like that. Anyway, point is, we're not going to blow up the Himalayas. And if you want to blow up the Himalayas, maybe your life doesn't matter. If you're like, oh yeah, we have to.
Whoa. The guy who wants to get rid of billions of people or reduce 99% of people to abject poverty, he thinks that those people who'd be willing to get rid of the Himalayas to, say, preserve 10 billion lives, that they are anti-human.
We need 10 billion people. Elon Musk says, oh, there's no overpopulation. We need more people. We'll just nuke the Himalayas and find some lithium there.
I'm not an expert on global population. I'm just fine if the global population stabilizes as it seems to be stabilizing. On the other hand, I don't think 10 billion people will be the absolute end of the world as we know it. Right? I'd rather we didn't increase the global population. That's my preference. Right? Let's stabilize and probably reduce the global population through natural, non-violent, non-coercive means.
That's not reason. That is not ethical. That's not moral. This is what.
Okay, so the guy who wants to get rid of billions of people or reduce 99% of them to abject poverty, he is concerned that other perspectives are immoral. Other perspectives aside from him, they're immoral, guys. Absolutely immoral.
You run into with this kind of human supremacist attitude, oh, well, we just need to breed more people. We just need more economic activity. It's just bigger and better. We'll just keep going on the same track. We can just finesse it a little. Oh, just a little renewables here. We'll just transition to renewable energy.
And he knows better. He knows that we need to get rid of billions of people. He knows it's either that or reduce 99% of humanity to abject poverty and ban cars. Kenneth Brown, ladies and gentlemen.
Nearly $10 a gallon in some parts of our biggest state, California, but several lucky drivers in California managed to get a much better deal. Fox's